Hello everyone. In today's class, we're talking about fabric types, fabric structures and use, fabric composition, difference between natural plant fiber and man-made fiber. Also talking about how we quantify fabric and how the measurement of fabric works in different lengths, 36, 45. We'll also be looking at how the local fabric market is structured. We'll be giving you tips on how to negotiate with suppliers. Without any further ado, let's get started. Selecting fabric is one of the most inspiring steps when it comes to starting a project because there are different types of fabric in the market. So picking the one that is suitable for you is very important. Generally, fabrics are made of fibers, and fibers fall into three different categories: the plant-based, the animal-based, and the man-made based. For the plant-based fabric, examples of them are cotton, linen, hemp, and rami, and they're usually very strong either when wet or dry. Properties of a plant-based fabric include the fact that they take dye easily, they're easy to launder, and they're easy to press. However, a plant-based fabric does not weak moisture or dry quickly, and also they do not attract insects, and also do not mildew easily. The animal-based fabrics includes silk, wool, hair fibers such as angora, cashmere, and alpaca. The fabrics they tend to be light in weight in relative to their bulk, meaning they look very full but are light in weight. They're also able to absorb moisture without feeling soggy. Take for example your knit sweater. They're naturally elastic, resist wrinkling, and take dye easily also. You may need to protect the animal-based fabrics because they attract insects such as moths and carpet beetles. The last one is man-made fabrics. Man-made fabrics can also be made from plant cellulose and also petroleum-based synthetic. For the plant cellulose, you have rayon, tencel, acetate, and tricetate. While the petroleum-based type of synthetic fibers that are made includes the common ones like nylon, polyester, spandex, and acrylic. The man-made fabrics try to mimic properties of a natural fabrics, and mostly in today's world, man-made fabrics are commonly used. Their qualities include elasticity, water resistance, moisture wicking, durability, color fastness, and insulating properties. Most man-made fabrics are generally easy to care for and comfortable to wear. However, there's one caution for the man-made fabrics. They tend to have a negative environmental impact. The structure of a fabric. Fabric is either made of fibers or yarns. Garment fabrics can either be knitted or woven from yarns. So fabrics are made from factory. Man-made fabrics are usually bonded by heat, mechanical, or treatment. According to this classification, fabrics can be broken down into knit, woven, and non-woven. Let's take a look at this video together. So this video is trying to explain how cotton yarn is being made.
The fabric for making jeans and tops. It's made from large bales of raw cotton.
This is raw cotton. This is what raw cotton looks like.
Comes from a plant, so naturally some leaves and stems are mixed in with fibers.
So when you get the plants from the factory,
the first machine,
they're usually into it. So you go to a machine that cuts all the plant fiber into equal,
then sends it through
into equal system, and it goes through an artisan for cleaning. The machine removes impurities from cotton fiber. So it goes through another process per machine,
which finishes the job
to also clean it.
Now the cotton goes through what's called a carding machine.
This is going through a carding machine now.
Rollers with wire teeth.
This is where the stopper rolls it
about the tangled fibers and line them up in pairs.
Exactly. It's already discarding it and is removing any short cotton and is putting them into rolls. Start spinning them into rolls.
Devised.
Semicolor hears it
and forms them a first stage yarn called sliver.
In this process, it's really starting to turn the cotton into the yarn. This is what the first stage of a yarn looks like.
Lines them up 6 at a time and draws them out, stretching them to form a second stage yarn.
Here's the second stage of yarn.
Then a machine called a roving frame
all these are yarn. That is a process of making
thinning it out
yarns. So this machine is trying to straighten a fiber.
Yarn is called roving. Depending on the type of yarn they're making, it's anywhere from 3.5 to 10 times thinner than sliver.
It's really around a thread.
Up to 30 times thinner, even more.
To make the yarns very strong.
Finished.
Now the yarns are done.
Now they have to transfer the yarn from all these small spool to industrial-sized cones.
They now have to transfer the yarns when they are done to a hill.
Method, the winding machine. It winds the yarn from the first spool onto the cone. Then it automatically takes the back end of that yarn and attaches it with a knot, the front end of yarn it winds it onto the cone, then attaches the back end to the front end from the next spool, and so on.
This is a big example of
The
how
machine automatically distorts it.
cotton fiber is being made from the farmer that plant it to the factory that's going to process it into yarn that's going to be used for garment production. All that they here is just making the yarns for cotton. They're not manufacturing any type of garment.
The winding stops. The machine cuts off the offending portion, then reconnects the ends and resumes winding.
So I dropped 2 links. You can check both videos. They explain deeper how a fabric is being made, how yarns are being processed from the farmers, from the plants, from animals. So when you watch this video, if you have any question, just drop them in the comments below. So in woven fabrics, separate yarns are at cross angles to each other. A loom is what they call a loom. A loom is like a machine that is used to make fabrics. Yarns are arranged lengthwise, which is called a warp, and also crosswise, which is called a weft, and are interlaced or woven at right angle together. Each yarn is stretched and producing a relatively stable fabric, which does not give either along the grain. Woven fabrics can be dyed or printed. These fabrics are stable and give some bias. If you choose a woven fabric, it can hold for a long period of time. The ideal case of using a woven fabric includes t-shirts, dress, blouses, jeans, and many more. So let's watch a video that shows how a woven fabric is.
Sheet of cloth, which is made by weaving or knitting process.
This is
Most fabrics are knitted or woven, but some are produced by non-woven processes such as braiding, felting, twisting, etc. Weaving process.
It is a woven process.
In
This is a loom
two
and moving.
sets of
moving.
yarns or threads are interlaced.
This is the interlocking process using a woven type of make. You can see the weft and the warp interlacing at each other at right angles. So as the way it's interlacing, the loom keeps pushing the thread to make sure there's no spacing, or inside of the fabric, they make sure there's no gap in between the interlaced weft and warp.
Or threads are interlaced at right angles to form a.
So this is ring moving.
The lengthwise threads are called the warped, and the widthwise threads are the weft or filling. Cloth is usually woven on a loom, a device that is a full thread in place while filling threads are woven through them. The woven fabrics has a lot of application areas like apparel, home textiles, GEO textiles, composites, medical, packing, seatbelts, industrial products, and so on.
Here's the process of making woven fabrics. In summary, you make use of a loom and you interlace threads at right angles to each other. These threads are called warp house. That's the summary of how woven fabric is being made. The next one is knit fabrics. These fabrics are made by interlocking yarns together, unlike woven fabrics that you need to interlace yarns. A knitting machine forms a rows of loops, and another rows of loops is drawn through that row. It should be repeated over and over in a similar process to hand knitting. Since they are made of interlooping loops of yarns and knit stretch, the fiber content of a knit determines the degree of stretch and recovery. The strength factor in a knit is usually described in terms of a percentage. For knit fabrics, it's made by interlocking knit together. A knitting machine contains rows of loop. Then another row of loops is drawn through that row. These steps are usually repeated over and over and over and is stretched. The fiber content of a knit determines the degree and recovery, and the strength factor is usually described in percentage. Most knit patterns have a measuring gauge you can use to compare the strength of the fabric against. Examples of knit fabrics include athletic clothes, swimmer, lounge pads, and even dresses. Let's take an example of that.
Knit fabric is manufactured by interlooping from a single set of yarn. In knitting, long needles are used to interlink, assuming a series of loops made by one continuous thread. Each loop or knot connects to another one, and when enough loops have been made, the result is a flat piece of material called a fabric. It has particularly a comfortable form of fabric structure for sports, casual wear, and
So the main difference between a knit and a woven is that for a knit fabric, you can usually see holes in between it because the materials were not bonded together by a loom in case of woven. So that's the major difference to easily spot out fabrics that was made by the knit or woven process. And the next one is weaving. Weaving is very common. There are different types of weaving. We have molding, we have bonding, we have felting. The previous video, which is the 50 seconds video I played earlier, explains it in details, visual representation. So make sure you watch that video. So the type of materials that we have in Manmade are fox leather, suede, polyester, and each of them has their own unique characteristics and sewing requirements. So different types of fabric. We have varieties of fabric from cotton, velvet, jerseys, silk, wool, denim, satin, jacquard, linen, rayon, chiffon, chenille, baize. It's a lot. There's a lot of fabrics that people use based off of specification. So my advice is, whenever you want to do a particular garment, do your research on alternative type of fabrics that can be used, that composition, the advantages there and disadvantages they have over each other. A guide to selecting fabric. For cotton, naturally is breathable, it has more comfort, it's not wrinkle resistant, means once it wrinkles easily, you can machine wash it and it has a cooling function. For linen, also same thing, breathability is very high, comfort is very high, wrinkle resistance, Then silk, breathability no, comfort is very high, wrinkle resistant also no, function cooling. So fabric composition of a clothing garments. Generally, natural fabrics are more expensive than synthetic fabric. You can pick this out from the composition of a fabric. Let's take for example these two shirts. One of them has a more organic cotton composition. I mean, it means it's 100% cotton and is around 10k to 50k for the shirts. While on the other hand, this one was made with 95% polyester and 5% spandex. Definitely, it's going to be cheaper than shirt made of natural fiber. Man-made fiber, less expensive. Could this that item, hoodies. This hoodie was made from 100% organic cotton and 20% wool blend. It's more expensive than a material that was made with 5% polyester and 50% spandex. It's in cases whereby you're asking why a particular material is more expensive than this, or why a production process is more expensive than this, the material composition the manufacturer is going to use for you is going to determine the price. So natural fibers are more expensive because of farming, because of you have to farm, you have to plant the fiber, you have to harvest it, and you have to process it manually, which is very, very strenuous. And it goes through a lot of machinery processes, which are also very expensive. For synthetic fibers, you can produce them automatically, you can manufacture the fabric automatically, there's no need of processing them, and they tend to be more cheaper. Quantification of fabric. Fabrics are usually measured in yardage at the local market, which is measured against the length. However, the width of the fabric determines the quantity of fabric required. Generally, fabric comes in different dimensions: 36, 44, 45, 54, 60. The wider the fabric, the lesser usage that you is needed to make the fabric. Meaning that if you want to buy a fabric from a local market, you tell them you want to buy 3 yards. They measure it against the length, not the width. So the width of the fabric is what determines what amount of fabric you should buy for a particular item. Some common widths of fabrics are cotton, which is 44 to 45 inches. Silk is a bit shorter, 35 to 45 inches. The wool, 45 to 60 inches. And lid are usually 60 inches wide. If you go to local markets and you see people asking, is it by 60? It means that they want to make sure the width of the fabric is the maximum width. So they don't need to buy more than they planned. There are factors that determine material consumption when you want to make them. The first one is a fabric pattern. So if a fabric is plain, it does not require too much consumption. But in cases where we have a pattern and there's a pattern that you need to follow when you are cutting the fabric, this might require you to buy extra, because once the pattern that you are about to cut does not follow, you need to get an extra fabric to cut out the piece that you need. This is why marking on solid fabrics is way more easier and consume less fabrics when as compared to stripes or when you have checks, like check patterns on clothes. Another factor that affects consumption is marker. So if a marker contains more garment, the fabric can be utilized properly. If it contains less marker, it means that you need to buy more fabric. Meaning, when a garment they are about to cut requires you to cut many small pieces. It means you can utilize every part of the fabric. But if it requires you to cut just large pieces, you might need to get extra because there might not be space to cut those extra big marked fabrics. Another factor is fabric shrinkage. Fabric shrinkage is naturally occurs in fabric. So some materials have shrinkage than other. Generally, when the material has more shrinkage, you need to buy more than when it has less shrinkage. Another factor is grain. Grain determines how much a fabric is to be consumed. If it is a straight grain, the consumption is quite low. But there are other types of grain which are cross grain, which is on the direction of the weft threads, perpendicular to the survey threads, and there's bias grain, which is on 45 degrees from the straight grain. We have other fabric defects that affect material consumption, like selvage variation. This can only be reduced with effective marking by an expert. Determination of fabric consumption from garment dimension. I cleared some examples with formulas on how to calculate the fabric consumption when you know the dimensions. You don't really need this, but if you want to take a look at it and drop any questions you have. And drop any questions you have for me. This is a guide to quantification of materials. So I already explained that fabrics are measured in length, but the width determines the average that you need to buy. You say this material by 50 to 60, 1 yard. If it is 2 to 54, 1 yard and 1/8. If the material is 50 inches, 1 yard and 1/4. If the material is 40 to 45 inches, 1 yard and 3/8. If it's 41 inches, 1.5 yard. So this goes on and 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 on. This chart shows the amount of yardage that you need to buy. For example, if you want to buy a fabric and it requires you to buy a yard for that fabric to be substantial. But if the material is 50 to 60, you can buy a yard. But if it's 2 to 54, you need to buy something higher than that. And it goes on and on and on and on and on like that. So this is a rough estimate that I made based off an experience from the local market. The t-shirts requires a yard to 1.5 yards. The hoodie is 2 to 2.5 yards. Pan 1.5 to 2 yards. Cargos 1 to 1.5 to 2 yards. Jackets 2 to 2.5 yards. Vest 1 to 1.5 yards. Then we have crew necks like sweatshirts 1.5 to 2 yards. Shorts 1 to 1.5 yards. These are not set in stone. They're just estimation based off on experience in the local market. The breakdown of the local market. The local market in Nigeria is so big and wide. However, there's still limitations. It is very important to understand that fabrics that are in Nigeria are not made from Nigeria. They are sourced from other countries. And this affects not just the pricing, but also quality control. Big companies like DJ and Kola buy their fabrics overseas to have a better quality control. For the local markets, materials from different parts of the world, Europe, Asia, America, these materials are mostly leftovers or waste from manufacturing firms in those countries. These materials are then shipped into Africa and Nigeria. The fact that we procure materials like this affects the quality control of our locally produced items. I mean, if you want to produce an item and you get the garments from the local fabric, you might not be able to get that garment after the material has gotten exhausted from the local market. It might take a very long time. We might not be able to get something similar at all. The major markets in Nigeria, number 1 is Aba, number 2 is Yaba, Balogun, Dagi market in Ibadan, the Kanta Kwari in Kano, Oshodi market, and Tejo Osho, Lagos. I've been to over 85% of these markets here. Aba, Yaba, Balogun, Tejo Osho, and Oshodi. So they sell different kind of fabrics in this market. Generally, Aba is where the port is closer to. So people from all these markets go to Aba to buy goods at wholesale price, then come to retailing at different states. Tejo Osho is a major part where they sell different type of fabrics, and also Yaba. So just do your research on the type of fabric that you want to buy. If it's streetwear, you're most likely going to get it in Tejo Osho. If it's things like lace, Ankara, you can get it in Oshodi. Just do your research. I'm not going to put a pin on where you should get fabrics from, but I don't know what fabrics you'll be using for your projects. So negotiating with suppliers locally. This is one of the major problems that you will face when negotiating with suppliers, because fabric is a way to save costs. Especially when you're just starting, there are other expenses that you get when you're trying to manufacture, but fabric is the one way to save costs. So if you're just starting with no experience, the most important thing I usually tell people is you need to make sure you do your research. Okay, what market am I going to? What do they call the fabric in the market? What is the generic name? What is the market name? Make sure you have enough information before going to market, because it saves you time and energy. And also, if you can get a sample of what you want to get, like just maybe a clothing or a swatch, most likely going to get a physical clothing or something that looks similar. It's better. So when you get to the market without any experience, there are different people in the market that tells you, okay, what do you want to get? What do you want to get? Especially the Igbo boys. I used to call them Barala boys. They usually claim they own a shop or their market agents. So just follow them. Anyway, that okay, I want to get the show the material I want. Follow them to save time and make sure you note. And when they're taking it to where they're about to get the material, make sure you note the directions. Make them take you to as many stores as possible, and make sure you price whatever price they're giving. Like, price is very well. In most cases, the brand boy that is taking you is claiming that he owns a shop or is taking you to different stores, usually inflates the prices drastically. After going to different stores, you don't need to buy anything. This is what I call the information gathering phase. You get information as much as possible from different stores. You can give your baranda boy probably some money just to settle in for stressing. And when you go back to the market after a day or two, the fresh look, and you ask for prices, you negotiate freely without any form of influence from an agent. Once you do this with 2 or 3 vendors, you can establish a general market price. Like, for example, the market price might be from 17 to 25, depending on quality or color availability. So this way, you tend to not get cheated, and intend to establish a relationship with material merchants. Having a good supplier for material merchants that is reliable in terms of price, quality is very, very important in your production journey. I've used this in different markets. I've used this in Abia State. I've used it in Tejosho. I've used it in Oshodi, and it works efficiently well. So I made some checklists that you can follow when you want to negotiate with fabric suppliers. First one is to do your research about the local name and generally accepted name. Do your research about the market, the material availability. Get reference pictures of, or take a physical reference. Go to the market with someone that is experienced. Or if you don't get, when you get to the market, don't follow anybody that says they own a big shop. Like, but be careful. No go and make it. You should not go and kidnap you. So go to many stores as possible and make sure you jot the prices and the material names. Now you go back to the market after some few days and you negotiate like an experienced person and get good price. So we're done with fabrics. If you have any questions that you would like to know, just drop them in the comments below. I attend to all questions. We're excited to make sure that you put this skill, especially negotiating with fabric suppliers, because that's what is most important. Understanding the fabric quantification very well. Thank you very much for listening. I'll see you in the next.